Now this number. We're going to go ahead and start. Our last speaker is, medical side, is Dr. Araz Marchalian. She's a pediatric oncologist at Children's Hospital Los Angeles, whose clinical and research focus is neuroblastoma. She serves as medical director of the New Approaches to Neuroblastoma Therapy, the NANT group, and is a leader within the Children's Oncology Group Neuroblastoma Committee. Her research centers on early phase clinical trials, immunotherapy, and the development of novel treatment strategies for children with high-risk neuroblastoma. Dr. Marchalian.
You all made it until the end. Congratulations. I feel like maybe I've closed this meeting before another time. But I'm really excited to be here, and I'm hoping that you'll get something out of it. And this has been an amazing meeting. All right. So first, what's new? What's NANT? Because we all throw this around. The name is New Approaches to Neuroblastoma Therapy. But what it really entails of is we have scientists, we have families, and that's the logo for the NPAC, wherever. And then we have the clinicians, and everyone's working together to come up with better clinical trials. The trials are early phase because most of the time we're taking things from the laboratory over to patients or from single agent to combination therapies. We're learning from every child because it's a consolidated group, and so trying to make the trials better with each time. So when we talk today, I'm going to tell the story of the trials and how they went, and for people who have heard this before, it's slightly different, but a lot of the stories may be the same. So the big picture is this. We have discover, we're going to test, we're going to learn, and hopefully improve. And again, you can see down on the bottom, for some reason, all of the consortia these days like suns, together with Walmart. The Children's Oncology, this is a new logo for them. It used to be green. The idea is we have this program project grant. It's NCI funded. It includes the labs, looking at trying to come up with how does neuroblastoma evade the immune system, resistant mechanisms, et cetera. But then, although we would love that pathway to be thick going forward, sometimes we're just stuck at the lab going in little circles, trying to figure out which new therapy we want to take forward. And there are other times that other ideas come along where we think scientifically they have merit. They go over to NANT. We make the trial, we finish it hopefully, and if successful or interesting, then perhaps the Children's Oncology Group, and a little bit more recently, our collaboration with Europe, it may be going to SIAPEN. I'm going to come up with a better slide set next year, but this is the map of the sites. The ones in letters on the side are the new European site, but really most thing that you need to remember is that we're all working together. Whoever's Meredith perhaps brought it up earlier, we are a collaborative bunch generally, and I think we may have slight biases in how we treat one patient versus the other as personal practice, but we are a collaborative bunch generally. On the bottom here are some of the group of the executive committee, but you can see John Maris, Yael Mose, Steve Du Bois, who's at Dana-Farber, Judy Villablanca and Kate Mathey started NANT with Bob Seeger, who in the 80s thought about immunotherapy for neuroblastoma, so amazing. And Julie Park is the leader, and I'm the person who works with her very, very closely. All right, so what are the stories we're going to talk about? Number one, we're going to talk a little bit about immunotherapy and how to improve it. And of course, this is not the only ways we can improve immunotherapy, but these are the ones that we are doing currently. MIBG, and a little bit of just radiotherapeutics. And we're going to talk about lorlatinib, but in the setting of, what's happening with MIGHTY, which is our new precision oncology protocol. All right. We all need to improve chemotherapy. I was thinking about it today, and I was thinking, this picture, I don't know if you've seen it before, where, you talk about equality versus equity, right? And, they're not the same. These children are not the same. I think about chemoimmunotherapy in some ways the same way. We want all the kids. Response in this case is on the top. And perhaps chemoimmunotherapy is working a little bit, but it needs the help. And these yellow things are what we're going to talk about today, is what can we add to the chemoimmunotherapy? If you look at on the side here and the Kaplan-Meier curve, that red Kaplan-Meier curve is the outcome of our patients who have ever progressed on chemoimmunotherapy. That is an outcome that we really need to change. This is from actually some CHLA experience, but it's also worth noting that chemoimmunotherapy and these other colors are all the other responses. So if somebody had stable disease on chemoimmunotherapy, they actually seem to do just as well as the one who were in remission. So there's a lot that we have to understand there. So really, we know kids who are having progressive disease, especially if their first response to chemoimmunotherapy was progressive disease, this is a really difficult area to handle right now. All right. So first stop, NK cells. I think many of you have heard about NK cells now. They're our first defenders. They are the ones who have to deal with viruses, et cetera. They're ready early. And so because of that, they're great protectors, and they can have these chemical signals, and they can activate other immune cells, but they have a short lifespan. So you put them in, they die after a few weeks. You don't have to worry about them doing anything rogue. If you see, there's some AI pictures here. So this is my attempt at making colorful pictures today. How are we tackling what we can do with chemoimmunotherapy? Right now, the three things that we are thinking about or doing: give patients better NK cells. That's sort of, they don't have great NK cells, we'll give it to them. Turn the NK cells on if there was a switch is the next. And then if there were breaks, release the breaks. If the NK cells are really not able to do what they need to do, or the antibody therapy is not able to do, that is, the release the breaks is the other way. So we're going to talk about each one of these pathways and how we're doing those trials. Number one is the NK cell trial. I'll talk about the first trial because this was the basis for the current NK cell trial. That was the trial where we took our own patient, we took their cells and grew them and then gave it to them. Great. It worked in the sense that we were able to grow the cells, but not enough to give them many courses of therapy. So this established a framework, but not necessarily the way we want to go forward. From there, this was it. The NK cells can help, but they took about 2 weeks to make. So, most of our patients don't have 2 weeks to just hang around after scans. And so we decided that we needed to go around in a different way, and decided that if we can take NK cells from people who are donors, who have good NK cells, and if we can put them in a school where they can learn to fight neuroblastoma better, and that's what we call when they're like TGF-beta imprinted. They're studying, essentially, they're learning to fight neuroblastoma. They're growing with the environment that neuroblastoma lives in. Then hopefully they're going to be trained to be better killers. The cool thing about this is that one healthy donor can give a lot of patients cells, because they can, these cells can grow very well. The training happens, you freeze and store them, and when the patient's ready, you can go forward. You're not having to produce new cells. So it's exciting in that sense. So the trial currently is what's called the STING trial. The ones on the bottom, you can see patients are just getting chemoimmunotherapy, irinotecan, Temodar, Dynatux, regular, and then on day 8, so about a week from when you started, you get your NK cells. Generally, so far, the trial has been going really well. I think 21 patients have enrolled, it's a phase 2 trial, and we're expecting 50 patients at the NANT institutions. And most of the institutions have opened, but not all of them. They're in progress. And you can get it for up to 6 cycles. It's off the shelf like we talked about, and the dinutuximab is just the regular dinutuximab. The one point that's important to know, and these are some of the design issues of these trials, that patients could not have had progressive disease on irinotecan, Temodar, Dynatux. If you think about it, a majority of the treatment is that plus the NK cells. If they've already had progression on it, the thought was that it wasn't enough to justify allowing them to come on study. I know this is a point of contention and a little bit of a discussion about whether that's the right approach, but that is in order for us to understand whether it works and how much better it works than just irinotecan, Temodar, Dynatux. That was the design of the study. So that study is nicely accruing. What else is happening? So here are the wake up the NK cells. We did a trial where we gave lenalidomide, which is an immunomodulator, with dinutuximab. And, this graphic on the bottom, it really shows that when they got the lenalidomide, their cytokines, everything really came up. So we were excited about it. And since then, this led to this discovery that we can maybe try new immunomodulators. So ANBL 2421 is the protocol at COG that, that picture that I showed from sun to sun. That's, the approach of, did the trial, that went well, the idea was good. And now if somebody is first relapse neuroblastoma, not multiply relapse, but first, and then they can get with dinutuximab and cyclophosphamide and topotecan. So we'll try and understand that trial after, it's not yet open, but it will open this fall. All right. The bee is here. Since I had sting, now I have honeybee, and these, I was telling someone earlier, they were named separately, and they ended up in the same idea. So this is another waking up story. We have IL-15. IL-15 is, if you guys remember, IL-2, things like that in early phases, which nobody likes. We're not going back there. But IL-15 is another cytokine, and it has some nice data. And this IL-15 agonist is actually a super agonist. It has, nice data with lymphoma, et cetera. And so this came about as a collaboration with St. Jude. So St. Jude is running the trial, but it's actually NANT-St. Jude collaboration, where the trial is a randomization of the humanized antibody that St. Jude has with this IL-15 agonist. So this one, because that's an injection, you get it similar to when you get the NK cells, but this is randomized. So some of the patients are going to get the humanized alone, which many of this crowd has not gotten, and the other is the investigational. The other, here, within the same design, you could not have progressed on irinotecan, Temodar, and Dynatux. Okay, so now we came up with how we can activate them. But there are other things that we can do with the immune system. The immune system is very complicated. There's like these crazy graphs that show with the interaction of each. But there's actually these break signals, and one of them is TIGIT. And if we have an anti-TIGIT, we can maybe make the immune system work better in killing neuroblastoma. So this anti-TIGIT compound, many of the anti-TIGIT compounds unfortunately didn't make it in adults, but there is one left. And they are potentially collaborating with us. And so it has not been completely finalized, but we are hoping to get to do that trial, although it's been a slow process because we've had to go from one industry partner to another to try and get TIGIT compounds. So the TIGIT trial, the interesting part of it was this was going to be our collaboration with Europe, so it's transatlantic study, and because of that, we were going to use dinutuximab beta since that could potentially be used on both sides of the continent. But we shall see what happens. This is much further back, hoping that it will happen, but there's still a little bit of question. All right. So as you can see, although you're looking at a time what trial is open, when you're diagnosed, when your disease is, you can see there are different trials, but each builds on the other. So, and the numbers say what year the concept started. So you can see TIGIT was supposed to be 2302. It's going to get renamed at some point. It's been 3 years that we've been talking about it. And you can see this is pediatric oncology pains. All right. Now I'm going to turn the page and talk about MIBG. I think this is what I call the OG targeted therapy. It's really the first use of theranostics, which is therapeutic, something that you can use for both diagnostic and therapeutic, right? The compound. So how does MIBG work? You have the norepinephrine. MIBG gets taken up by this NET receptor, and it goes into the neuroblastoma cell, and beautiful, killing. It is a type of beta radiation, and we'll talk a little bit later about that, because each one of these alpha versus beta travel differently and may be used differently. So it's been around for a very long time. I don't know what that is. So here we go. Historically, it's been going on a long time. In fact, in the 1980s, Kate Mathey, who I showed initially the picture, she and a few others, Greg Yannick out of Michigan, started some of the work with MIBG. And since then, there have been many trials trying to understand, A, how to use it so that patients can be able to get it safely, et cetera, dosing, and also what combinations. So more recent years, in that green time period where I've been around, the MIBG has been mostly used in combination. And in current clinical, these are the numbers you'll see, but I'm going to touch on the COG study for 1 minute. But the NANT ones are the ones that we're going to focus on. So it has a predictable toxicity because it is, we know we've been doing this since the 80s. And it's really, it is effective in heavily pretreated disease. I realize that some people delay use of MIBG and some people give it a little earlier in their practice, and I think that's a different approach, but we have plenty of data about, its safety. So I think others touched upon this. Fall this year, we're gonna know whether MIBG given up front makes a difference in better outcome for patients. So there was a trial, kids were randomized, some got MIBG, some didn't. Now, that MIBG was lower dose, and it was given on its own with no radiosensitizer after cycle 3 of induction. So whether that goes forward as positive or negative won't affect the studies of MIBG. It will affect what happens to upfront studies, however, because if this is positive, going forward, there would be studies that would have to incorporate that. So fall COG, we shall hear all about it. We're all waiting. So how can we make MIBG better? The idea is we have MIBG, it's already delivering radiation, but can we make the tumor cells more sensitive to this radiation? And vorinostat, which is a drug that you may have seen, even though it's a pill and can be given in liquid reconstitution, is a radiosensitizer. It's a class of drug called HDAC, but the point that you need to remember is that it was studied in the NAND, and a study where MIBG alone, MIBG plus irinotecan and vincristine, and then MIBG and vorinostat, and you can see the response rate there. So there's a improvement with the vorinostat arm. And since then, we all give MIBG with vorinostat when we give it. That has become the standard of care. So what else can we do for MIBG? The one concept of radiation and how radiation works is there's this concept called abscopal effect. I just love the name. And the idea is you treat one site with radiation, but when you give immunotherapy, you get more sites to respond. It's sort of when you give radiation, the radiation damages the tumor cells. The tumor cells release signals. Those antigens are out there. The body sees them and starts attacking not just the tumor that you radiated, but others. So the immune system becomes more active, kind of like you've taken a break off. And so that was the reason the next trial came about, which was to look at the MIBG with dinutuximab. So the idea, and I'll talk about vorinostat in a minute, but the idea was that we were going to give MIBG with dinutuximab to see if we can improve the response rate of MIBG therapy. And I'll show you results shortly, but in the middle of the trial, we identified the results of the 1101 study where vorinostat was a winner. So we decided to add it into this, and so there are two arms, one without vorinostat and one with vorinostat. And there's stem cell rescue at week 2, and then you have your disease evaluation 6 weeks later. So the response rate of each one of them, part A is without vorinostat, and part B is with vorinostat. So both of them have MIBG and dinutuximab. And you can see the numbers. One is the CR/PR MR rate, so we're saying how much did you improve, but the other one is the other side of the coin, how many kids actually had progressive disease on the study. So in most MIBG trials, that number is actually not very high, and that's what we saw here, a nice, relatively low number, but in the one with vorinostat, it was 0. That's pretty impressive. Of course, we don't know. It's a small number of patients, so we need to confirm that, but this is pretty exciting results where we know we're combining two of the best agents for neuroblastoma, immunotherapy and MIBG. All right, so where do we go from here? I'm happy to report, but we are launching the MIBG trial, finally. The trial is called 2102, so it's been a little bit of time in the making, but it is launching in 2027, no matter what. And patients will get randomized to MIBG and vorinostat, MIBG and dinutuximab, and MIBG, dinutux, and vorinostat. There are some early looks. If one arm looks like it's not going to be helpful, they can be dropped, and then the rest of them can stay. So this trial will be a big trial. It's 105 patients, I think, so we'll have plenty of patients and hopefully be able to compare. So here are the MIBG trials that I told you about, with the years increasing, and although it looks like 1701 and 2102 are the same, it's actually because 2102 is a 3-arm randomized study, but the same agents based on 1701. So I'm going to switch gears for a minute because there is some exciting work that's going on with other targeted radiotherapy. We all know neuroblastoma is very sensitive to radiation. If you have ever talked to another patient with another disease, many other diseases get much higher doses, where neuroblastoma we give lower doses because neuroblastoma responds to radiation pretty well. And so we talked about MIBG, which the first for the net transporter. But in the meantime, during this time, in the adult world, both in thyroid cancer, prostate cancer, and neuroendocrine tumors, there have been FDA approval of targeted radiotherapies. Well, what does that matter? Well, that means there's agents. If there have been trials in adults, the idea of targeted radiotherapy is really growing quite a lot, and driven, as you can imagine, by prostate cancer, because prostate cancer is very, very common. How do we benefit? Each one of these, you're looking at what the target is. We have one is this PSMA, has nothing to do with neuroblastoma. It's just in the prostate. But this neuroendocrine tumors, SSTR2, actually neuroblastoma expresses it. And so it's nice because then we can use it. So this slide was supposed to be a little earlier, but really the question of why MIBG is not yet approved is because it's a small market and complicated production. And so generally, as we talked about, this is a retrospective analysis that put a lot of MIBG studies together, and you can see these are the rates that we are seeing across many, many studies over 20 years time period. All right, so switching back to our SSTR2. So if you have high expression, you can actually image with dotatate. Dotatate is a known scan, like I said, it's there in adults. And you can scan and you can see it's a type of PET scan. And if it's positive, potentially one could treat with ludotatate. This study, there was a study like this, actually in neuroblastoma with some lower doses in Europe. Didn't really work that great because it was actually lower doses. But this is what's being used in the adults and with targeted radiation in neuroendocrine tumors. So the exciting thing is there is a new SSTR2, but this one has actinium, which is a different kind of radiation. It gives alpha radiation. And it's a high energy radiation and actually has less bystander effect because it doesn't travel as far as MIBG does, because MIBG is beta radiation. And it's designed to improve precision in neuroendocrine tumors, but we are lucky enough that the agent is out there and the company is willing to work with us, and we are likely to do the pediatric study on this. We are in development. And if it does go forward, you should see it at the beginning of this year. Next year, 2027, you should see it. So how does it work? Exactly the same way as adults. You image the patient, you confirm they have it's present, then you deliver the radioisotope and hopefully kill the neuroblastoma. The design of it is still in development, so I did not put a little design, but you can give it consecutively. You don't have to, it's not like MIBG where you give it much less often, et cetera. It's slightly different because of the less bystander effect. All right. So this is just for figure, there are different ones. The low dotatate that I told you, there is a European trial that's going to start with higher doses of that. And that is FDA approved in the United States, and the MIBG in each one of them. Even things like omburtamab, that's B7H3 radioimmunotherapy. So this area of study is really growing. Okay, so we talked about beta and alpha emitters. Alpha is always a little bit, this picture just shows like how far the radiation travels, and you can see the little circles a little smaller. When we talk about PET scans, I can never not talk about MFPG because that was a trial that was done, and it's another PET scan. It works in the same net receptor as MIBG, so it is for MIBG avid tumors, as we had that discussion yesterday, but it has more sensitivity from what we can see. It's still in development about where we can put it. I would love to put it in our MIBG trial so we can really study it in our patients with the MIBG, but work in progress. All right, in the last 15 minutes, we'll talk a little bit about biology. You heard a lot today from Meredith about biology, and I'm not, not going to belabor what the different ALK mutations are generally, but they are a little bit different, and some of them worse than other. The trial for the ALK studies was done. Here you can see the reason is because the frequency of ALK mutations increases with time. And so you get up to a quarter of patients who have some ALK positivity or a little more when they have relapsed. So this is the story of the pipeline. We identified that ALK mutations exist. Lorlatinib is identified as a drug. We ran, opened the study, made the trial for the phase 1 trial. We got promising response rate. Now it went to the Children's Oncology Group, and we shall await the study results in a few years. But what is exciting and happening is that at this point we are analyzing, Dr. Burko, who is with the Maris in Mosaic Labs, has been working and looking at analyzing the circulating DNA on that trial so we can understand methods of resistance, et cetera, and see if there's promising ways to predict response or lack of response. So this is from Dr. Burko's work on the NANT trial, and the only reason I wanted to show this is because there's those red dots there are more ALK than they started with, or progressive disease. And you can see those big red dots, those patients are all patients who responded and then progressed, and they had more ALK, but now the ALK was resistant. There's a group of patients, there's nothing there. They're not doing, they may be progressing, but there's no increase in the dots and how big they are, and that's because they were having not just ALK, the ALK was staying the same, but they're getting RAS, MAP, kinase, other mutations. So the work that's happening, understanding how that happens so that we can target it. You heard Dr. Morgenstern today talk about RAS, anti-RAS therapies, things like that. This is the reason we are excited about it. And of course, there's a group of patients that we still don't understand. They don't even have the ALK, and they're supposed to be ALK mutated because their tumor has ALK. So we're, learning quite a lot, but this is the ongoing work now coming back from the Children's Oncology Group, the back and forth arrows we talked about. So, and Meredith touched upon this. It's not just in the Children's Oncology Group, it's also in the NANT and other groups where the idea is to always learn from our patients, and that can be done by storing extra materials so that we can just, go back and learn how to make things better, whether it's DNA, whether it's plasma, all those antibody cytokines and things like that are in your plasma, the RNA, and that can apply for both bone marrow and blood. So what's really important is to do this over time so that we can really understand, but then also that this is open for people to request samples. And you heard earlier some studies on GM2, that was because of the biology study. So what did we learn so far? That it's complicated. These dots just say the relationship of one thing to the other. As you can see, there are multiple relationships, there are multiple things associated with other things, like some things we know, NMYC and ALK and there's some associations, but there's a lot of different mutations and different frequencies. And you all know neuroblastoma, each patient almost acts as unique. They're not exactly unique, but they can be in groups. And our idea is to try and figure out these groups. And that's some of this work that is ongoing. So how else can we make this better? We need to be better about getting more samples, but really in a different way. So far what I've been doing, we've been for the biology study, storing, et cetera, and then trying to decide what studies to run. The MIGHTY protocol, which is also opening this year, is to understand the biology and data for new studies. So what's happening is for one study, you go on, you get sequencing of your tumor, if you have it, or if you biopsy it. You get your circulating DNA at every disease evaluation, and those results come back to the patient and the family, and it's with discussion with the family that one can decide what does that mean, because there's a lot that is still being figured out with those liquid biopsies. But the idea for us is to go forward with the testing, whether it's the liquid DNA, immune profiling. We talked about tumor biology, GD2, things like that. And the hope is to have some biomarker discovery so that we can not blindly choose what study the patient should be on, but maybe, something to help us. Now, right now, we have certain things. MIBG avidity means maybe you can get MIBG. SSTR2, maybe you can get, but we need more. We need more ways to understand what does our tumor have and what is the right treatment. There's a molecular report that comes out, and I just put the word SDOH here because I want you to remember that we are also looking at social determinants of health within this study. And we thought that was very important in the biology study because it's a long-term study, and we are going to try and understand the barriers for patients also to come on to NANT studies, because it is really important to really understand that so that we can make that better as well, and all the financial and other toxicity that's associated with being on study so that we can mitigate that if possible. So this is a simplified, you're getting your results. You're not getting results of everything. You're getting results of any genomics, so liquid biopsy in your tumor. The rest of it, how much cytokine your tumor, in your blood has is not really going to help in current state, but we are putting it all in one big database to really understand. And one of the other things that we've started incorporating, aside from MIGHTY, is in some of the new studies, we are putting what's called patient-reported outcomes. And so instead of just asking the doctor, how did the patient do, the patient also is filling out forms about how they feel. And we thought that was really important for our immunotherapy trials, MIBG trials, and so all of them have had that incorporated. SDOH in the MIGHTY, but each protocol will have these patient-reported outcomes that are specific. You can't ask the same questions for MIBG as you would ask for dinutuximab, for example. All right, final thoughts. This is the curve I was trying to show earlier. Again, this is actually the curve of overall survival probability of NANT patients from quite a few years back now, but it is in a more recent era. And so you can see here that we have a group of patients who, at least if their response on the NANT trial is one of those non-green ones, so they seem to be doing okay. Not great, those curves need to be higher, but it's the patients who are progressing on a treatment who we need to be faster in trying to figure out what are the biomarkers that we can use. But again, back to, maybe the CR patients look a little better, but this was not statistically significant. So lots of information. We are working on this and trying to understand response and trying to understand what kind of response is more meaningful, et cetera. But the end result is that, we need to get all these curves better, but that curve for patients who have progressive disease is far from optimal. And I do want to warn you, I don't want you to take this home and say, oh, this is, because it is from the start of a NANT study. It is not start of relapse. It's not for, and so you could have come on a NANT study much, much later, and most of our patients come in not in their first relapse. And so this is a further along patient population. So, you're all here. Some of you are thinking what treatment your children need to get. And I know I did not tell you what you need to get. Here, the purpose was for you to understand that our trials are sort of sequentially building on each other, sequentially learning from each other. But ultimately, what your child gets in what order is really dependent on so much of your tumor, the biology, as well as prior response. And that's why I always say, see a neuroblastomatologist, and it's probably a useful endeavor so that these are all the things one has to think about in order to make a decision about what the next treatment would be. We still have lots of challenges. We talked about drug access and supply. The supply for MIBG is getting a little better. Keep our fingers crossed. Obviously, there are lots of therapy costs, and the tumors are constantly evolving way ahead of us, so we must evolve too and try to understand and see if we can stay ahead of it. So, as Meredith said earlier, every sample does teach us something. Every treatment does teach us something, because the idea is we learn from response or no response. And then this collaboration is really, really important, including our industry friends, our scientific and our advocate community. And so, it's a going forward, and there are men and women in that picture, because I added the women on there. So here we are. I want to, most importantly, obviously thanking all the patients and families and the NANT sites for involving getting on the clinical trials and to bring us all together. I am very firm believer of collaboration, I do think that even in my era, we've made lots of progress, and we will continue to do so with time. That picture of the restaurant is us yesterday at Cheesecake Factory, and I wanted to thank CNCF, because there are very little other diseases that have this kind of environment where I may be having some ice cream with some of our families from all over and some of our industry partners. And this is what makes neuroblastoma unique, and what hopefully keeps us going and getting us into progress. That's it. And of course.
Does anyone have any questions? I got one question.
Somebody.
Well, hopefully just a quick one. So going back to the SSTR2 study, did you say, kind of multi-part question, did you say there's going to be a new trial opening early next year?
Yes.
So that's a yes.
So the early next year trial is dependent on a little bit of still contracts and work that we have to do between now and then. So we do have to do a few things to jump through some hoops, but because it's an important trial for them and the FDA, it is going to get fast-tracked.
And then a more personal question. So my son had a PET dotatate scan at Mayo at some point. It was the only time he ever had a PET dotatate scan. It was positive, right? So does that mean, I don't know if you can answer this definitively, that he has the SSTR2? It would be, like, does a PET dotatate positive scan kind of mean he'd be okay for this trial?
That is the test to look at. And so far when I've looked, the majority of our neuroblastomas are, so that's a really important thing. And I do what it was before presumably is the same. I do not know the data of if there's any changes, but I would be highly confident that it's going to be still positive.
And final question. Is there I know there's a limit to how much MIBG therapy you can get. How does that play with this dotatate?
So generally, when I think about studies, we prioritize phase 2 studies that have more response rate, right? MIBG has been around. We know how to give it. We know the toxicity. We know the response. So we usually prioritize the MIBG studies. But just because you got MIBG does not mean that this might not work, or vice versa, because this is a different receptor, the NET receptor versus the SSTR2, and so how much it gets uptaken is a little different. And so I suspect that many of our patients would have both. It is still a little bit of a dose deciding. There's not a lot of dose finding, but there's some work that has to be done to complete the protocol.
Will there be a lot of slots in this study, or is this going to be one of those with like
we
5?
do think there will be, but again, the final ink on the paper is not completely finalized. But yes, there will be. It's not going to be a small study, and I expect for people to be able to get on most.
Okay. One more question.
This is more of a historical context kind of question, I guess. Since we've been on this journey, it feels like there's been a lot of disruptions, I guess, in general to research and things like that. There was COVID and supply chain stuff, and then there was like federal funding cuts and things like that. Is that like kind of more of a recent phenomenon, or is that, are there always issues like that? Where do you think we stand now on disruptions and things like that? And is there anything that this group here can do to help with any of that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, academic medicine has always been challenging, right? We've always tried to find funding, et cetera, to be able to do these trials. We're not a lucrative, industry generally, and so that has always been there. I do think it's a little bit worse at the moment, but I do, our hope is that just like everything else, things go ebbs and flows and things might change. One of the points that it is also very interesting, even within the time that I've been around, the increase in cost in our clinical trials, and that's really related to hospital costs and things like that, when we just generally where they get their funding from and where eventually everything has increased a bit, and so trying, even if there is enough money, trying to get enough money for the increased cost has been a little more challenging, I would say, in the last at least 5 years. We so far have been lucky enough to be able to do it, but I will say it's a lot of work to try and get a sufficient amount of money to do the trials. My admin will always look at me and say, oh, well, we don't have the money for all of it. And a lot of times we'll say, let's at least start, because we can start. We have some, and that's where the program project grant helps us, because we have a little bit of sort of early money where we can start some of the work, but we need to fundraise a lot more to do each one of these trials. Our fundraising comes from NCI, NIH, things like that, Department of Defense, but then also a lot of philanthropic organizations that you all are in, and also industry. So it's a mix of things. It's a big pie of, different sources. But I'm an optimist, so I think, it's just a matter of being persistent and eventually getting there.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Marchalian. Thank you. Our last presenter came to us from a neuroblastoma family and introduced us, and we thought it would be a great time for her to come and talk. Her name is Savannah Almiron, and we give you Savannah. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Savannah Almiron and I am a neuroblastoma survivor. I'm so grateful to be here today and have the opportunity to share my story with all of you. Looking around this room, I know every person is here because neuroblastoma has touched your life in some way. While each of our journeys is a bit different, this one is mine. My story begins back in May of 2020. I was diagnosed at 14 years old, which in the neuroblastoma world pretty much makes me a senior citizen. Before cancer, though, I was a normal teenager who was constantly on the go. My mom is somewhere here, and if you ask her, I am a kid that never sits down. And even better, you all just heard from Dr. Marichelian, my incredible oncologist. Let's ask her the amount of times I told her, no, I can't have chemo on Monday, I have to go to rehearsal. But being that it was the start of the pandemic, I was forced to take halt and rest for once in my life. I always describe COVID as a blessing in disguise. It was a time that I realized something felt off. It began with a small burn from within, a feeling that persisted for months, never disappearing. I felt an actual lump and had a weird feeling overall. I went to my mom, as I do with a lot of things, and she felt exactly what I was talking about, and it triggered something within her to call my pediatrician to push for an ultrasound to be done. This week was one of the craziest weeks of my life. On Monday, I had an ultrasound. A few hours later, my pediatrician called my mom and told her words I will never forget, that I had a rather large mass coming from my left adrenal gland that needed further imaging. On Friday, I had a CT scan. A few hours after that CT scan, the radiologist of all people called my parents and told them, I can't say much, but if this were my child, I would take her to Children's Hospital Los Angeles ASAP, and that is where my journey begins. I was admitted to CHLA, where I spent about a week searching for answers. Given my age, my case was not the most straightforward. Neuroblastoma, as we know, is commonly found in kids under the age of 5. So being 14 came with a whole new set of challenges. I had dangerously high blood pressures, abnormal labs, countless scans, but all we really knew was that, like I said, I had that left adrenal mass. My team considered several possibilities, but came down to 2 diagnoses, one of which happened to be neuroblastoma. After what felt like endless tests, we moved forward with exploratory surgery and a biopsy. On June 16, 2020, my entire 9-pound, 9 by 6 by 4-inch tumor and a few local lymph nodes were removed. During surgery, a complication caused my left renal artery to be clipped, cutting off all blood flow to my left kidney, when we were told that I would now only have one functioning kidney for the rest of my life. About a week later, we were given my diagnosis of what they presumed to be stage 3 intermediate risk neuroblastoma. Given that all my disease was removed with surgery, we decided that no further treatment would be needed. But given my unfavorable histology, in the case that my disease would return, which was very likely, it would come back smarter and stronger. I was cancer-free for almost 2 years, but in February 2022, during my routine scans, new disease was found in my neck and abdomen, moving my diagnosis to stage 4 high-risk neuroblastoma, and I was now 16 years old. As difficult as it was, one thing I was grateful for was having time to prepare before treatment began. I underwent egg preservation, spent about a month making memories with my friends and family, and at the end of March 2023, I started treatment. Over the next year, treatment took me through 5 rounds of chemo, 12 rounds of radiation, and 8 rounds of chemoimmunotherapy. None of it was easy, and sometimes I still battle some of the side effects till this day, which really commonly we hear about hearing. My ears ring all the time. The upside, whenever somebody asks me, do you hear that beeping? I look at them like really crazy, and I'm like, wait, you hear it too? After my 5th round of chemo, we were preparing for our stem cell transplants. But unfortunately, because I had one functioning kidney, we determined it was too dangerous to go through with it. Instead, we shifted to that all too well-known chemoimmunotherapy with dinutuximab. I describe Dynatux as a time to be had. While it took some time to figure out the perfect cocktail that worked for me to keep me comfortable through everything, I actually found it super routine. In a strange way, I preferred this phase of treatment. With chemo, I feel like you go in, you get your chemo, you feel fine, and then a week later you are neutropenic, you have mucositis, and you end up back in the hospital anyways. With Dynatux, I always said that you feel bad during it, maybe take a few days to bounce back. But after that, you get to go back to your life and feel as normal as you can before you go in for your next round. In April 2023, I had my last round of chemoimmunotherapy. I had a scan a few weeks later, which declared me with no evidence of disease. In June, I had a clear PET scan once again, and in August, I rang the bell to declare the end of my treatment. And me being me always on the go, I picked up everything about 3 weeks later and moved to Boston to start nursing school. Which brings me to where I am today. I'm now 20 years old and just over 3 years into remission. Along the way, one thing became incredibly clear to me. The thing that made the biggest difference in my journey wasn't the treatments I received. It was the people that cared for me every step of the way. As I'm sure we all know, nurses are the heart and soul of the hospital world. They can create a safe place which allows every emotion within the individual to come to the surface. I always describe them as more than just a job. They recognize that patients need somebody to be their advocate. After everything I went through, I knew that's what I wanted to do. I'm now a rising senior at Northeastern University, graduating with my degree in nursing next year, with the goal of becoming a pediatric oncology nurse. Northeastern has an incredible program called Co-op, where we spend 2 6-month periods of time where we get to gain, we work full-time to gain hands-on experience in the field of our choice. Last year, I completed my first co-op in the hematology oncology unit at Boston Children's Hospital, and I just finished my second co-op at the Dana-Farber Cancer Institute in the Jimmy Fund Clinic, where I still work to this day. Walking back into the pediatric oncology unit was emotional in ways I never expected. For so many years, I knew every single corner of the 4th floor of CHLA. Now I'm navigating a whole new world, not only as a member of the healthcare team, but as a future nurse. Every day I have the privilege of caring for children and families who are facing many of the same battles I once faced. Some days I see pieces of myself in those patients. I remember what it's like to be scared, to wait for test scan results, to celebrate the little victories, and to lean on the nurses who made even the hardest days feel a little less overwhelming. Being able to come back on the other side of my journey is something I never take for granted. And when the moment feels right, and I do share that I'm a cancer survivor too, I get to watch a kid's face light up or see a little bit of relief come over a parent's face. In those moments, I'm reminded that sometimes hope isn't found in having all the answers. It's found in seeing someone who's walked a similar road and is standing right there beside you. Looking back on everything, and as hard as it was, it changed me in ways I could have never imagined. It taught me how quickly life can change and how important it is to never take it for granted. And through it all, I made a conscious decision to not ever let cancer define me. I always used to tell my nurses and doctors that cancer is a hobby, not a lifestyle. One thing I've learned through this journey is that it's anything but linear. Every year, even years after treatment ends, there are still moments that can be scary. Every scan, every lab result, every follow-up appointment can bring back emotions you thought you'd left behind. Trust me, this literally happened to me last week. But those moments don't erase how far you've come. They're simply just another part of survivorship. I encourage everyone to have a positive outlook, no matter how hard things may get. I'm not saying it's not okay to feel the big feelings, because you have to when you go through something like this. I'm saying that even in the hardest moments, you have to remember that there's still life waiting for you outside of cancer. Cancer became part of my story, but it was never going to become my entire identity. It taught me resilience, gratitude, and the importance of finding joy even on the hardest of days. I was diagnosed also at an age that gave me a perspective many neuroblastoma patients don't have the opportunity to share. I remember every conversation, every scan, every treatment, and every emotion that came with it. Many children diagnosed are simply too young to understand those moments themselves. So being able to stand here today and share the patient's perspective is something I consider a privilege. To the parents and families here today, thank you. Thank you for continuing to show up, to learn, to ask questions, and to advocate so fiercely for your children. I know firsthand how much that means. To Lillian, who I see you sitting in the first row, thank you for introducing me to this amazing conference and believing my story was something worth sharing. To Dr. Marichalian, thank you for believing in me and for encouraging me to keep living my life, and for making all of this even possible for me even being able to stand here today. And to all the doctors, researchers, and healthcare professionals in this room, thank you for your compassion, dedication, and hope you give to children and families every single day. And one final thank you to Nikki and Pat, who are even giving me this incredible opportunity and introducing me to this incredible community and giving just this opportunity overall today. It's really an honor to stand here and share my story with all of you. If there's one thing I hope my story leaves with you, it's this. There will be hard days, and it's okay to feel every emotion that comes with them. But don't lose sight of who you are outside of this diagnosis. Keep making memories, keep chasing your dreams, and keep looking towards the future, because there is life after cancer. Thank you.
Thank you, Savannah. That was beautiful. This concludes the conference. I do it all the time. Please come back again. Give me strength to keep going. Please come back again, because it's so important for you to learn as much as you can about this disease, because there's so many decisions you're going to have to make in your life. And they're going to be very, very tough decisions. And just to let you know you have a community of people right here. You have hundreds of doctors and nurses and statisticians and scientists that are working their lives away to try to find answers for neuroblastoma. And after 30 years of being in this, I pray to God that things happen a little bit faster because we just can't wait as many years as we've been waiting. So please come back again. Like I said, God, give me strength and fix my neck right now because it really hurts. But please, I hope you enjoyed yourselves. And if there's anything we can do for you, please reach out to us. If you can do any fundraising for us so we can support all of these wonderful doctors, that would be, greatly appreciated. And I just wanted to say thank you all for coming. Thank you to our sponsors, our doctors, everybody, for Nikki, Connie, my friend, who helps out all the time, and Nikki, my assistant, and the Fagan family for taking care of your children that were here, and I'm pretty sure they had a good time. So I know one of them asked why their mother was there. They didn't want their mother there. They were playing. But anyway, thank you so much for coming. We really appreciate everything, and safe travels home. Thank you.